Hi again, everybody. This is part 3 of my story. I left off last time where my older brother gave me an ultimatum that I had to speak to my dad of what I believed, and Anyway, before this meeting could take place, that I arranged to have, I was going to have with my dad, while I was doing all the preparation. Apparently Lionel went. He'd gone straight to Dad and told him what I'd said. A lot of that is in another letter I wrote them. I wrote a lot of letters, I'm sorry. There's a lot of reading if anyone's interested, but there is good information in a lot of the articles even that I quoted. Anyway, before I got a chance to read anything, I got a phone call from my parents. And they wanted to come around and see me. And that's when I found out that Lionel had gone to see them. So they came around and Dad very seriously said, Lionel said that you have some idea that I might have been involved in sexual abuse with you. And then he really blew me away because he said, what I think you're referring to is a time when you were a child, you were still young, going to school, and some friends of ours who had a daughter, they said that sometimes the father had a bath with the daughter. So your mother and I thought it may be a good idea, and so once you and I had a bath together, but nothing happened. I couldn't believe it because I thought, how interesting that he brought up about the bath, because that's where I would say these things. Anyway, then I went and got what I had prepared to say to him, and I read it out. And again, then I stated, well, just like I said, if you say nothing happened, that's the end of it. And so, hopefully, I thought, well, that's it. That's the end of the story. I've done what I had to do. That's it. That wasn't the end of the story. Fred phoned me several days after receiving my latest letter I had sent to him and Lionel, saying that he couldn't really see that it could be true, and denied sincerely a lot of the things that he had said earlier. A few days after this, my parents called in and my father demanded that I go to these people that I had confided in, there weren't many, and tell them that there was absolutely no foundation to what I was claiming. He brought this up again several days later and was most upset that I wouldn't just accept that he'd said nothing happened. I said, you believe nothing happened. I understand that, but I can't. Just because somebody tells me something didn't happen doesn't mean that it didn't, But I didn't want to make a fuss about it. I said, let it go. It's a dead issue. He continued to be really annoyed about this. Oh, boy. So once again, because that's the only way in my family I feel like I can have a say, I wrote him another letter. So a little while after that, Dad told me that Larry, one of the elders, wanted to speak with me. So at a time suitable to me, Larry and my dad would talk to me about my state of mind. I wasn't too happy about this, so I phoned Larry and I said, well, I don't think this is really fair. Seeing you and Dad have discussed this privately, I'd like to speak to you privately first as well, just to talk to you about my viewpoint on things. And then he asked me, would you prefer a different elder than your dad? I said, yeah, I would. So he arranged that, and he and another elder came round for a visit. Among other things, they confirmed my statement that, no action could be taken because there weren't 2 or 3 witnesses, and I sort of reminded them, I didn't ask for any action to be taken. So there was a lot of the tension in the air, and so I wrote another letter to my parents, and I sent copies to my brothers. Within the next couple of weeks, I learned through my daughter, I'll call Olivia, having an access visit with her dad, Tim, that Tim knew about what was going on in my family, and seemed to know about my suspicions of sexual abuse. I was pretty upset to think that confidential information had been passed on to him, especially too when the elders had made a big point of telling me I was not to discuss this with anybody whatsoever. Olivia had the impression that it was her Uncle Lionel who may have told Tim what was going on. So I phoned Lionel and I asked him, but he said, no, I haven't had any contact with Tim. So I didn't really know. I didn't know who it was. Somebody had talked to him, but I didn't know who. The letter that I'd written to my parents, I included a video of a talk show just to try and educate them a bit about sexual abuse stuff, but I hadn't heard anything from any of them until one day my dad just dropped in the copy of the tape and said, we watched it. That was it. Nothing from my brothers. I actually got it written here in my book, if you learn nothing else from reading this, please respect the wishes of a survivor as to who should be told. Please respect confidentiality. Far less hurt would have been caused in my case if this had been done. Now, around this time, a 10-year-old girl in the same congregation as us confided in me that a brother in the Kingdom Hall had molested her. She'd also told Olivia and another friend about this. I tried to get her to talk to her parents, but she was scared that her dad would go and punch up the brother concerned. So, yeah, I was a bit concerned and didn't know what to do about it. I'm pretty sure I spoke to one of the elders about it, saying I was in a bit of a situation here, but I didn't want to go over the little girl's head and do anything about it. A little while after all this was happening, I went away on holidays with my kids, but my depression was pretty bad, and I really felt suicidal over the things that were going on, and I reached out to a couple of elders that I knew on the Gold Coast where we were holidaying. I wrote down all my feelings and a sort of brief summary of what had been happening in my family, and they came around to see me, and I read it to them, and they were wonderful. They were really, really kind and really encouraging and loving. And they actually had a desire to learn more about abuse. And a few days after I'd been back from holidays, I got a phone call from them asking Paul and Marie and I if we would come and talk to the body of elders in their congregation, along with their wives and a few others who were interested in learning more. And so we did it, and Paul sort of did a little talk up, took his notes. His notes are included in my book, and we went down there and we had a great discussion. We were so happy that somebody was listening, and as I said, Paul gave his talk, Marie had a bit of a say, and I had my little bit of a say, and a little while later I got a card from one of the main elder that one of the two that I talked to. This is December 93, and they just said, "We've wanted to write and let you know just how much we appreciated the effort and time, as well as great strength and courage to share your feelings and experiences with us all. Everyone at that meeting was touched in some way and deeply moved by what they heard. We just hope that you were not too drained and exhausted afterwards. We know with confidence that Jehovah will continue to give you the needed strength and spirit to keep going. You girls are such spiritual little giants for sure. We have enclosed a little something for you, just a small way of saying a great big thank you. Know you can do with it. Our very warmest love and affection to yourself and also Olivia and Matt, my kids. Warm love. In spite of this, these elders were actually reprimanded for having this meeting. And I know there was one occasion at least my brother expressed concern, my brother who's the elder, Fred, expressed concern about this meeting, and our elders did as well. There was just a bit of a fuss about it, and they were told not to do it anymore. The matter regarding this young girl, 10-year-old, who'd confided in me, came to a head, thankfully. Her sister found her diary where she described what had happened with this brother, and she showed it to their parents. And so her father he came to me, I think, and then I told him to speak to the elder that I'd given the hypothetical situation to. Of course, the elders told him he needed to approach the brother, which he did, and he denied it, and that was it. Nothing could be done scripturally, and it's never been followed up anymore with elders or the authorities or anybody. My daughter Olivia, who's good friends with this girl, she had a lot of difficulty being at meetings and seeing this brother and knowing what he'd done to her friend. She feels, that's what I wrote in my notes, she felt very uncomfortable around him, and it really made meeting attendance difficult for a time there. So all that was about the end of 1993. Early in 1994, I wrote a release letter, what counsellors call release letters. It's a letter you write that you don't send to the person, but it's a way of getting out your feelings at the time, and sometimes it's recommended that after you write it, you read it out and then you burn it. It's a way of sort of moving on. So I wrote this release letter to my dad, and I would like to just read a little bit of it. It'll be in the book, but yeah, gives you a little bit more info. Dad, I'm so disappointed in the way you behaved towards Marie at the assembly. I'm really concerned for you that if you don't change your bad attitudes, you'll find yourself in a big trouble one day. Your pride has always scared me, and I'm really worried it will one day be your downfall. What's so frightening is that I don't think you even see it. I don't really believe you would ever accept any counsel in this regard. I know you've put in many years of faithful service to Jehovah and have worked hard, but so did Solomon, and he went astray in his later years. Also, King Asa allowed pride to blemish his record at the end of a long life of faithful service. After mentioning such ones, the January 1594 Watchtower says, yes, even old-timers sometimes need counsel. Page 13 and paragraph 14. Dad, your attitude in many things leaves a lot to be desired. Even when Marie applied Matthew 18 and phoned you, you were unrelenting in your attitude, even going as far as telling her to keep away from me. I'm 44 years old, Dad. I have a right to choose my own friends. When Marie mentioned to you that Mum was cool to her too, your comment was, and rightly so. I should here stop and tell you what prompted that. We had a circuit assembly, and Marie had always got on well with my dad. They spent a lot of time out witnessing together because she used to pioneer. And during the lunch break on the Saturday of the circuit assembly we had, when all this had all come out, she just walked up to him like she usually does, says hello, and goes to give him a hug, and he steps back and, don't you touch me, la-di-da, and carried on like a pork chop with all these people in the foyer of the kingdom all watching. So that's what prompted me to write this. I went on a bit more, and I just said, this whole situation with my family is so sad. I'm looking at things so differently. Our family is so dysfunctional. The book Adult Children of Alcoholics Syndrome really opened my eyes even further. The DIRS, D-I-R-S. That's us. Denial, isolation, rigidity, silence. Everything must be kept within the family. You even got upset about someone outside the family studying with my kids. How ridiculous. Well, Dad, I'm sorry, but you're going to get even more upset because I'm accepting help from people outside the family. You may as well get used to it. I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. I'm sorry if you don't like the way I do things sometimes, but it is my right. Let me make my own mistakes and learn from them, please. This was all part of my healing and standing up for myself, and yeah, that's why I did it. But I wanted to read that because it told a bit more about what had happened at the assembly. And yeah, we got burgled, but that's another story. It's not really important. In January 94, I put in my notes, I've started actually wondering whether I may have acted out some inappropriate behaviour with my younger brother. This wall that I believe exists between us that he says, I imagine, would make more sense. At first, I thought maybe he'd done something to me, but when I sort of thought, well, wait on, he's 5 years younger than you, and as horrible as it might seem, I thought, gee, maybe it was me. I watched one of my talk shows and it was on sibling abuse. Yeah, so that was something that went through my head at that time. Most of my notes over the years are filled with guilt, like missed the book study, feel guilty, oh, missed the meeting again, feel guilty, didn't get out witnessing this morning, feel guilty. My whole life is just full of guilt. It's just incredible. Then in February 94, I got in the mail from this elder and his wife who had been at the meeting that we had down the Gold Coast. I got as an enclosure this report from a brother, Jay Smith, who was a clinical psychologist, counselling psychologist. And it was a 1986 TAD meeting in Toronto, which was theocratic attorneys and doctors. And it was fantastic. It had a lot of stories of witnesses, going through different problems, emotional problems, and it was just really lovely. And one part in particular I remember I loved it. He said, examples like Job prove helpful. When he was a universal spectacle and being the focus of the heavenly court, all he was doing was sitting on the ground, scraping himself, attending his sickness. However, in his mind, his heart, in his core, he loved God and refused to abandon him. At this point, it was not Job's productivity that the angels were watching, it was his attitude. So this was a report from 1986, and I remember at the time thinking, gee, I wish I could just give every elder a copy of this to read. But time marched on. Situation stayed the same in my family. My parents were planning to go away on a holiday to Perth in May 94. I think it was, May 94. Around this time too, I had some suspicions that my son may have ADD. I ended up taking him to a clinic, and they did confirm that he had ADD, but I don't know. Then people would come out and say, oh yeah, it's the flavour of the month. They're saying every kid's got ADD, so. But I had a book called The Hidden Handicap, and as I read it, I have to read this from my notes, I'm sorry. The thought again crossed my mind that I could have suffered these problems also. Of course, with the denial so strong, read the sexual abuse, I started to think, well, what if I'm wrong after all? What if this is where my problems came from? I hate this confusion. Children with learning difficulties also have eating problems, hypoactivity, which is underactivity. One part said, even if the bread isn't buttered to the edges, is a drama. Fred said once that he can remember me getting upset about that very thing with Mum. Lack of coordination causes little interest in sports or physical activities. That was me. Depression is frequent. Also, disorganisation and concentration problems. Fussy eaters, preferences for particular textures of food, low self-esteem. I don't remember any writing difficulties in particular at school. Reading wasn't a problem. Maths was but I always felt that I struggled through school as an average student. So this led me to where I was totally confused. Let's suppose these problems were caused by learning difficulties and not sexual abuse. So then I had to ask myself all these other questions. Well, why do I have certain sexual issues? Why did I hate pop? Why did I have that reaction to the hemorrhoid treatment? Why do I hate beer and get scared around people who are drinking? Why did I need a lock on my door? Why don't I remember hardly anything of my childhood? This was a good one. Why did Susan ask Fred once, what terrible thing happened to you when you were a child? And then go on to ask me if I knew what it was. Why does my mother live in denial with everything? Yeah, so at this point, I don't know. Everything was a mess. But I'll finish up there and continue some more in the next part. Bye.